Hey friends, it's time for reading today, and we are still reading Frindle. I love Frindle. It is like one of my favorite books so far because it's just funny and it kind of relates to your own life. You can kind of relate to him, right? Everybody has had, and if you haven't yet, that's great. I'm so happy, but everybody has a teacher that they don't quite click with. You're not gonna click with every teacher that you have. So we can all kind of relate to Frindle. It's pretty cool. Before we start, I want to talk about chapter 8. So what do you remember about chapter 8? Well, I remember it's kind of where we start the war between Nick Allen and Mrs. Granger. So this is where he comes up with the idea for Frindle, right? And then they meet after class. Y'all remember they meet after class and they talk that they are going to start using Frindle. And she kept 80 kids after school one day because of the word Frindle. And then at the very end, the principal has decided that he's going to make a home visit and talk to Mr. and Mrs. Allen's, which are Nick's parents, about this whole Frindle fiasco because he refused to stop using it. His whole classmates and all of his friends refused to stop using it. So, pretty crazy, right? Okay, so before we start, the concept that I want you to focus on today during chapter 9 is central idea. Central idea is the same thing as main idea. If you've ever heard main idea being used by your teachers, it's the same thing, the same word. So central idea is what the text is mostly about. So every chapter in this book has mostly been about something, right? So like chapter 7 was the start of Frindle, and we know that because he found the pen, he made up the word, he told Janet Fisk about it, and they started using it in the school again because that supports the detail. So we think of central idea as a table. So the top of the table is the main thing it talks about. Now, it's not like a whole bunch of stuff. It's just like one main thing, okay? This is when the word Frindle was created, right? And then the legs of the table are the details that hold it up, the details that make us know that that's what the central idea is. Central idea is what it's mostly about. Sometimes you've heard main idea, so keep that in your brain when you see your paper today. So when you're reading, we should always be evaluating details that are told to determine what the central idea is of the paragraph or the passage or the chapter or the whole entire book. This is always really helpful when you're doing your stop and jot strategy and when you're reading a book, because every single chapter, you might forget what chapter 5 was about, but you wrote down a quick stop and jot, a central idea over that chapter. So that's going to help you remember what the central idea is. We use stop and jot on our star passages. So that's going to help you remember what every single paragraph was about. So when they ask you a paragraph, or when they ask you a question about paragraph 3, you can quickly go back, read your stop and jot, and you don't even have to reread that whole paragraph. It just helps you out a little bit. I'm just trying to make your life easier as a reading teacher. So we're going to start reading chapter 9, and the whole entire time I want you to keep in your little noggin anything that we can add to our anchor charts and what you think the central idea is. So here's some anchor charts we have. Do I need to add any more themes? Remember, if you come up with anything while you're watching my lesson videos, please send me a message in the inbox. Now, nobody has sent me a message yet in the inbox with anything they feel like I should add. And I was really hoping to give some tickets out for people who are participating and sending me ideas to add to the anchor chart. I was hoping to give them a shout out in our videos, but nobody has sent me anything. So I have all these tickets here. They're reserved for children who send me ideas to add to the anchor chart in the inbox, and nobody's done that yet. So I haven't got to use any tickets. Bummer, right? So maybe you now want to add some stuff after chapter 9. Send me a message in the inbox saying, Miss Simpson, I think we should add blah, blah, blah to the theme anchor chart. I think we should add the character trait, whatever, to Mrs. Granger. Or I think that we need to add something to our character change chart. I think Mrs. Granger's changed a little bit more. Or maybe you're thinking, Miss Simpson, I think we need to add more to our plot chart and graph that out. So we'll see if anybody decides to message me for some tickets. All right, let's get started reading chapter 9. Your goal is to find stuff to add to our anchor chart. Your second goal is to think, because you're going to need it, think of what you believe the central idea is of chapter 9. Y'all ready? I'm actually kind of curious what it's going to be, what's going to happen with the principal. And not only can you message me things about to add to the anchor chart, you can message me connections. You can message me predictions. You can message me questions that you want to that you have about the chapters. You can message me just about anything about the book, and I'll give you a ticket. All right, let's get started. Mrs. Margaret Chatham had been principal of Lincoln Elementary School for 18 years. She knew Mr. and Mrs. Allen because they had all served together on the building committee when the old Lincoln School was torn down and the new one was built 6 years ago. When she telephoned on the afternoon of October 1st to set up the meeting, Mrs. Chatham had asked Nick to be there too. It was 6:30 when she knocked and Nick opened the door. "Good evening, Nick," she said, no smile. "Hi, Mrs. Chatham," said Nick, backing away as she filled the doorway. She was a large person, as tall as Nick's dad, with wide shoulders. Nick guessed she would play linebacker on a football team because that's what his dad had played in college. Okay, we need to add somebody to our minor characters. She's not a major character, but she is a minor character. So Mrs. Chatham. Oh, I put it in. And that's the principal. Okay, let's keep reading. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Allen," she said, stepping into the living room. She was wearing a long black raincoat with a red silk scarf tied loosely around her neck. She kept her coat on, but took off the scarf and tucked it into her left pocket. She shook hands stiffly with both of Nick's parents before sitting down on the chair to the left of the couch. Nick's mom and dad sat on the couch, and Nick sat on the rocking chair that faced Mrs. Chatham across the low coffee table. "This is not an easy visit for me. We're having some trouble at school, and it appears that Nick is in the middle of it." Then, while Nick's parents listened, Mrs. Chatham laid out the story as she saw it. Nick encouraging the other kids to use his new word, Mrs. Granger forbidding it, the ruined fifth grade class picture, hundreds of kids staying after school, and a general feeling that there was a rebellion at school with no one respecting the rules anymore. Nick watched his mom and dad while Mrs. Chatham talked, looking from one face to the other. His dad was listening carefully, nodding and frowning. He looked embarrassed about the trouble, but his mom looked kind of annoyed. And when Mrs. Chatham finished her story, Nick's mom was the first one to speak. "But doesn't all this seem like a lot of fuss about something pretty silly?" Nick sat quiet, but in his mind he shouted, "Hurrah for Mom! Hurrah for mothers everywhere!" His mom wasn't annoyed with him. She was annoyed with Mrs. Granger, maybe even annoyed with Mrs. Chatham. This was getting interesting. Guys, I did not see this one coming. His mom being mad at the principal and the teacher rather than him? I did not see that coming. Go, Mom. Mrs. Allen was still talking to the principal. "I mean, is there really any harm in the children making up a funny word and saying it? Does there have to be a rule that a word like this may not be used?" Mrs. Chatham sighed and said, "Yes, I suppose it does seem silly, but Mrs. Granger thinks that it's rather like keeping children from saying ain't. There have to be standards. That's why we have dictionaries. And really, the problem isn't so much the word itself, it's the lack of respect for authority." Mr. Allen said, Mrs. Granger's right about that. There have to be standards. We can't have kids walking around saying aunt or ain't, can we? And that's when Nick piped in. "You know that big dictionary in Mrs. Granger's room? The word ain't is right there in the book. I looked it up, and there it was. I don't see why I can't use a word if it's in the dictionary." Mrs. Granger even said that her big dictionary was the law. Nick looked from face to face to face. That stumped them all. He had just launched a first-class thought grenade. "Well, yes, but, well, as I said, the word ain't and even the word frindle, these are not the real issues here," said Mrs. Chatham. Mrs. Allen said, "Well, I think the real issue is Mrs. Granger's reaction to a harmless little experiment with language. It's an overreaction. Don't you think so, Tom?" And Mrs. Allen looked at her husband. It was Mr. Allen's turn to look from face to face to face. He was lost. "Yes, well, sure, I guess. I mean, it's not like anybody's been hurt. I mean, it's not like vandalism or stealing or something like that. His sentence trailed off, and he rubbed his chin and stared thoughtfully through the window on the wall behind Mrs. Chatham. Okay, Mr. Allen seems very, very, very uncomfortable. All while the three grown-ups sat there in an uncomfortable moment of silence, Nick had a sudden vision of what was really going on here. It was a chess game. Nick against Mrs. Granger. Mrs. Granger had just tried to end the game by using her queen, Mrs. Chatham, and her black raincoat, the Black Queen. Nick didn't know it until the attack was underway, but he had a powerful defender of his own, good old mom, the White Queen, and the game was not over. It would go on until there was a winner and a loser. Mrs. Chatham didn't stay much longer. There was a little more talk back and forth across the chessboard about how children have a right to explore new ideas, about the importance of respecting teachers and the work they do, about everybody needing to keep up standards and make school a safe place to learn. Then Mr. Allen offered Mrs. Chatham some coffee and banana bread, but she said, "No thanks, I really must be going now." She thanked Nick's parents, and they thanked her. Nick opened the door and said, "Good night, Mrs. Chatham." Then the Black Queen put on a red scarf and walked into the October twilight. "Nick, I think we better talk a little more about this," said his mom, sitting back down on the couch. "If I find out that you have been disrespectful to Mrs. Granger or any other teacher at that school, then you really will be in big trouble." "I haven't been disrespectful. Honest. I did get everybody starting to use my word, but like you said, it's not hurting anybody. And I'm sorry if me and Dave and Pete got everybody to ask Mrs. Granger to borrow a Frindle. That was mean, I guess, but she started it by making kids stay after school and write 100 sentences just for saying my word once. All the kids like to use my word. It's just fun, that's all." "Well," said Nick's dad, "if it gets everyone upset and makes the principal come talk to your mother and me, then it must not be fun for everybody, is it? And I think you should just tell all your friends to knock it off right now. I mean, tomorrow." Nick shook his head. "I can't, Dad. It won't work. It's a real word now. It used to be just mine, but not anymore. If I knew how to stop it, I think I probably would, but I can't." And Nick looked at both of their faces to see if that idea was sinking in. It was. "Like I said, I won't be disrespectful, but I do like my word. I guess now that we're just going to have to see what happens." And the chessmen, Nick's king and queen, had to agree. The game would go on. Whoa, this is getting pretty heated in between Nick and not Mrs. Allen, and Mrs. Granger. I think I'm going to have to add something to Nick's character chart. I'm going to say brave. Because, woo, I would not have the guts to do what he is doing. No, not in a million bazillion years. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the main idea, the central idea. This is your assignment today. What you're going to do is you're going to tell me what the main idea is of chapter 9. And then you're going to have to give me 3 details that support that main idea. So remember everything that happened. What is the main event that happened? I'm not going to tell you the answer, but think of the main thing that happened in that chapter. Now, when that main event happened, what are 3 supporting details that proves that's the main thing that happened? So, this is your main thing, your main event. While that main event was happening, other small little things happened. Like, I'll give you one example. His mom stood up for him. That's a supporting detail that would support the main idea. Maybe something else that happened. So think of what the main event is, and what are some small things that happen in the chapter that back up that this is your main idea, your central idea. Before we get going, I want to look at the plot chart one more time. Instead of just saying the invention of the word Frindle, I'm going to put the invention of the word Frindle and the use of it. That's really the main problem, because all of the kids are using the word Frindle. He invented it, and now all of the kids are using it. And now for falling action, we're trying to get to a resolution here. When Mrs. Chatham came to their house, her goal was to resolve the problem. Did she resolve the problem? No, because there's no way to get the kids to stop using the word Frindle now. So this is not the right marker. Mrs. Chatham came to Nick's house for a conference. So that's one event that they tried to resolve this problem right here. That's one thing that they're doing to resolve that problem. But did she get a resolution? Did she solve it? No, not yet. So we're probably going to have to add some more stuff to our falling action, don't you think? All right, so we're now on falling action. Do you have anything to add to any of these anchor charts? If you do, or have a connection, a prediction, send me a message in the inbox and I will happily give some tickets out for kids who are participating. All right, guys, I love y'all so much. Bye.